Welcome to this edition of Rattling the Bars. I'm Mansa Musa. It's in this country, among other things, a person has a right to he's innocent or she's innocent until proven guilty. In this society and in our judicial system, this right very rarely gets acknowledged, mainly when you get arrested and you can't afford to get out because of an excessive bail. An excessive bail might be in the form of your inability or the person's inability to pay the bail. The bail might not be excessive for Donald Trump. The bail might not be excessive for Booba Madoff. But the bail for an average person will be excessive. Here to talk about cash bail and all things relative to bail reform is David Gaspar of the Bail Project. Welcome, David.
Thank you for having me.
Tell our audience a little bit about yourself.
So myself, I'm currently the CEO for the Bail Project. It's a national not-for-profit that pays the cash bail on behalf of individuals in a position of need. I myself am somebody who has been system impacted at the age of 22 years old. I got sentenced to 21 years in prison. In large part, I received that sentence as a plea bargain, not understanding really what my rights were, not being able to afford bail myself, and feeling the pressures of the system just weighing down on myself as well as my family. I ended up going to prison, getting my education. I wrote and filed my own appeal and ended up giving the state back 11 years of the 21 year sentence that they gave me. But what was most surprising and hurtful to me was that when I went back for resentencing, my lawyer at that time said that I had already did 5 years more than I should have ever done. And when I think about that, and I think about the impact that bail had on my life and my inability to actually advocate for my innocence or for a just sentence, it just really empowered me and put a fire inside of me that made me want to be part of this work now.
All right, tell us about the Bail Project. Give us an overview of what the Bail Project is and how it operates before we go into like some of the aspects of cash bail.
Yeah, so I think the starting point is, somebody finding themselves in the situation of needing assistance with bail. So this is somebody who is sitting in county jail, has not yet been convicted of anything. Mm-hmm. The only thing preventing them from actually having their freedom and being reunited with their family, as well as their ability to continue living their life, is the fact that they don't have enough money in their pocket or enough money in their bank account. And so a loved one on their behalf, could be a wife, partner, could be a child, will reach out to us and they'll say, hey, we have a loved one that is currently sitting in jail and could be in need of your help. And so then we'll actually reach out to that individual. We'll schedule, what we call an interview, but it's just our opportunity to talk to them directly. Right. And if we feel like we have the opportunity and the ability to be able to support them post-release, then we'll go ahead and post their bond and then support them and return into court successfully.
Now, okay, and I opened up early about talking about how a court in this country, everybody has a right to bail and not be charged, not be given an excessive bail. Talk about how this whole thing, this cash bail, draconian system, got to where it's at right now in terms of creating a roadblock for, like you said, for people being able to get out for no other reason than not having the ability to pay 10%. I was in the county jail, and I recall a guy come in there, and he had $1,000 bail, and he couldn't pay the 10%. So what he did, he wound up staying in the detention center for like a year, and when he went back, the judge gave him time served. Talk about that.
Yeah. So when we're talking about bail, I think it's really important to kind of ground that. Like, this is what we see in our Constitution of the United States.
That's right.
The protection against excessive bail is the language. But we also have the rights of due process, the rights to be able to face our accusers, the right to be, speedy trial. And all of these, rights, these principles that we stand on as a nation, they look and sound great on paper.
That's right.
it's when we get to practice that we see this breakdown. And what we see on TV also misinforms the public as to
Yeah, come
how
on.
that
That's right.
process
That's
really
right.
works. Because in TV, it's more aligned with what we see on paper.
Right, right.
It's a script for a narrative
Yeah,
for a
yeah.
television show
Yeah, that's
versus the
right.
reality that we live.
That's
And
right.
so really what the Bail Project's work is first disproving that money is the actual driver that brings people back to court. And we've been able to do that successfully. 92% of the people that we bail out return to court. So they're
Right.
coming back. They don't got no money in the game. They have no personal interest other than just wanting to put this to rest, put closure to it and be able to move forward in life.
Right.
But what ends up happening, and there was an article that came out last year that said more than half of our American population doesn't even have $500 in their bank account for an emergency. So when you stop and think about, they don't have $500 period for an emergency. Now you're going to give them a $10,000 bond. You're going to give them a $15,000 bond, even if it was a $500 bond. What you're doing is you're depleting that household of any means that they have to respond to an emergency.
Right.
But that's for the bond itself. What about the days that they lost at work?
That's right.
What about the potential of them losing their job? What about the potential of them losing their children, their housing, the ability to make their next car payment? When you hold somebody in jail each and every passing day, you are harming that individual and the family unit that they're part of.
Right.
And so when we talk about the harms and we talk about the need that's there, protecting ourselves against excessive bail is to keep our family units intact, to keep our communities whole, and to allow our actual nation to succeed.
Right.
When we start to tear that apart, what ends up happening is we cannibalize on our communities, those who actually are the backbone, the Constitution, the preamble, we, the people.
That's right. That's right.
Well, which people are we talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Those with money that benefit from these systems, or those without that are harmed by them? And so, at the end of the day, really what we're trying to do is level that playing field. We're trying to make money not be the issue that's standing between somebody and their freedom, and allowing them to go home, keep their life as intact as possible, support them with court reminders and transportation assistance so that they can successfully return back to court and put closure to that bad moment of their life.
And you know what? And you made a good observation earlier about the presumption of innocence, and then inherent in that right is the presumption is that you have a right to speedy trial, you have a right to confront your accuser. Now, if all things perfect, and we know in Law and Order, all things is perfect on TV. We know on every TV show where it's the law and some kind of disorder, then we know that it's a perfect scenario. But in the real world, we know it's not. And the fact that a person who has a right to a speedy trial, when a person get when they first arrested, they're offered this right. Okay, I want a speedy trial. Okay, now you're not gonna give me bond. Okay, you're not gonna give me a bond, and you're not gonna give me a speedy trial. And then and then too, what you're gonna do is you gonna give me a public defender because I can't afford to get bond. I can't afford to attorney. You give me a public defender, and now my speedy trials is getting waived because it's being postponed because they can't find my accuser, or they playing the weight game until they get me to a point where I can't get bail, I can't get a speedy trial. The only thing I can get is the offer they put on the table, and that's the plea bar. And is this premeditated on the part of the state?
I personally can't go as far as to say that's premeditated. What I can say is that we have a system that has been operating like this for decades.
Yeah.
So it's not unknown to people.
Right.
So it's not one of those things where, wow, I wish I would have known that so I could have done something about it.
Right.
We know this is how it works. We know this is how it moves. And, just kind of going to, the rights, that you were just naming, being able to stand in a courtroom for your bail hearing and actually have an opportunity to make your case isn't even afforded to everybody.
That's right.
Across our nation. You walk in there and sometimes it's already predetermined and you're just hearing the outcome for the first time. Mm-hmm. And what we want to do as the Bail Project is actually create a bail hearing where the actual defense has an opportunity to put forth their case. The state has the opportunity to put forth their case, and that there is a weighed, decision point that the judge makes on record that can be evaluated.
Right.
That's what we all believe is happening anyway. So why are we not moving in that direction? But to, kind of get back to your question, if we know it's not working for the people, and we understand that there's a significant harm that's being caused by it, there is a valid question that should be asked, and that's why do we allow it to persist?
That's right. That's right. And you know what? And I'm gonna go. Let's flush that out about that process, because what you just said, that's the law. This is not a theory. This is actually this is supposed to be what actually take place when you have a bail hearing. The purpose of a bail hearing is to determine whether or not the person should be released on bail. Now, inherent in that concept, and you can weigh in on this when you want. Inherent in that concept is the state put on evidence and information as to why a bail should not be granted. That's when it's no bail, or why an excessive bail should be granted, or why the state is not opposing being released on recon. Inherent in that concept is that the defendant is allowed to present information as to, one, why they're a good candidate to be released on a low bail. Two, the damage that's going to be done if they remain in this environment. All these things, all these factors will be taken into account. Am I correct?
Yes. Yeah, you are. And,
And so, like you say, then the question becomes, why is this going on? And Dave, I really want you to flush this out, because we're not talking about cap. We're not talking about like we saying like over 2,000 people is in the detention center in Cook County in Chicago. We're not talking about 2,000 people that have capital offense. We're not talking about 2,000 people that's a flight risk. We're not talking about 2,000 people that's recidivating. We're talking about people that's like just got caught in a situation that ultimately might result in their innocence, might result in exoneration. But in between then and there, they're not given the opportunity to get to stay the course in terms of like going back to what you say, being back inside. Why are we allowing it to exist?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll try to unpack that a little bit, but I'll go back. To your point, we have over 500,000 people in our jails across the nation, and more than half of them are there without a conviction. So they're there for the reasons that you said. They just simply can't afford the money. But I think what's important for people to understand as well is that those three areas, those three lanes, that being held without bond, being released with bond, and being released without bond. Those are the three options that a judge has in front of them.
Right.
But two of them are release. So even though bond is it's the triggering factor, it's still the judge has made a determination that this person is safe to go back into society.
That's
that
right.
This person is to what they have in front of them is not going to cause any harm. That's the judge's decision that they've made. Now, when we talk about the money, why does money need to be the factor when the money disproportionately impacts those within a poverty level? We know that people of color are the most impacted by these decisions as well. So why do we allow that persistence in that way? And a lot of it goes back to what is easy. When we think about human nature, change is difficult for people. So if we already got a process in place, unless we find a easier way sometimes to get people to engage, they're going to just stand their ground on where they are. But there's something else that we already know. Bonds, bail in general, is about money.
That's right.
And so we have to ask ourselves, who's benefiting, who's profiting?
That's right. Now we're getting down to it.
At the end of the day. And we can say that there's a whole magnitude or multitude of individuals that benefit from this. But what cannot be lost at any given point in time is that we're not talking about a few $1 million here and there. We're
No,
talking multi-billion-dollar
that's right.
profits
It's an
being
industry. That's
made
right. It's an
off of
industry.
keeping people incarcerated
It's an
pre-trial.
industry.
Once again, people that have not been convicted of anything, people that the judge has made a determination. If they got the money, they're perfectly fine to go out there back into society. So we're not talking about releasing dangerous people. We're not talking, the judge has it within the discretion. If they deem somebody to be dangerous, a threat to the community, they can hold them without bail.
That's right.
They can keep them. So we're not talking about, like, the decision point really is, why is the money still a factor?
Right.
If you've already determined this person is eligible for release,
That's right.
as long as they got the right amount of money in their pocket, really, now we have to ask, well, who's benefiting from this? Who's potentially profiting from that decision?
And then at that, on that point, right, as we wrap up, right, we know that the prison industrial complex, mass incarceration, which is a new form of slavery, is profitable. So all hands on decks when it comes to like fueling it. So we know the county jails help to fuel it. But let's talk about, as in the few minutes that we got, let's talk about bail reform. Where are we at in terms of like a national movement for bail reform? Because I've been in some spaces where they have made some astronomical progress in certain states, in certain cities. Where are we at in terms of like having a national movement for bail reform? Because as you said, the effect that it has, people lose their job, people lose their houses, people lose their medical, people lose their lives. So where are we at in terms of bail reform?
Yeah, great question. First, I'll just start with, you mentioned the prison industrial complex. Pre-trial, jail populations being where they are, and the impact that you had named earlier, how people are taking plea bargains just to put an end to it, just to be able to move forward, is one of the leading factors to the prison population as we see it today. So it's one of the leading drivers. If we can fix that on the front end, we won't see all this on the back end.
That's right.
With that said, where's bail reform? During these more recent election cycles, we saw the wording, the phrase bail reform being weaponized. And it really confused people as to, well, really, what does that mean? What is bail reform and how does that impact me? And we saw them make a close association to the violence, all of the raising and violence that's happening throughout our nation. And there's no empirical evidence to say that there's a correlation between bail reform and not. As a matter of fact, like you said, there's a few places that have actually put forth any meaningful bail reform. But we see the violence that people are pointing to happening in areas the bail reform has not even been part of the conversation, let alone part of the change that could have even potentially contributed to that. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done to dispel the misinformation that was spread during that period. Now, what is bail reform and where are we today? Bail reform is about answering the question, is it necessary? Does it actually serve a purpose in our society today? And we've been able to prove that it has no place. Money is not what's bringing people back to court.
That's right.
Money is not what's preventing people from being a flight risk. Money's not. What money's doing is keeping people incarcerated unnecessarily and causing additional harm to their life. That we have been able to prove. But what taking the umbrella of bail reform has also done is it stopped us from talking about specific issues that have led to our jail populations growing.
That's right.
Mental health, substance use mistreatment. These are things that have been diagnosed as actual medical conditions. Why are we treating them with a cell? Why are we locking people in a concrete box and telling them your mental health needs to get better on its own in order for you to be successful instead of giving them medical attention? Why are we saying that locking you in this box and the abstinence or the us keeping you away from whatever your addiction is going to make you better? Let's treat those the way that they need to be treated. And first and foremost, let's treat them with respect by allowing them space and conversation and not bunching them underneath the bail reform umbrella. Then we could talk about homelessness, poverty. These are actual conditions that people live with. Like, these aren't choices. Somebody didn't wake up this morning and say, you know what, I feel like I'm just going to be broke today. Let's look at what their opportunities are and how we can support them in being successful and landing not just a job, but a
Right.
meaningful job that's going to uplift
Living
them
wage.
and their family unit. You know, let's take somebody who's homeless and figure out a way, how do we get them the help that they need so that they're no longer on the streets and in need of assistance. And then once again, let's give the actual medical attention to those individuals that have the mental health and the substance use challenges that they deserve to have. Then we can start to talk about, well, hold up, we've already released half the jail population anyways.
That's right.
By addressing the actual underlying causes that led somebody to that potential interaction with law enforcement. And if we can just even solve those, I think we can have a much more honest conversation about what bail reform means.
Thank you, man. Look, there you have it. The real news. We're actually criminalizing poverty. It's poverty that's being criminalized and not criminal activity as we know it. And we ask that you, our listeners and our viewers, you really take note of this. We're not talking about bail reform. We're talking about reforming a society that penalize and criminalize poverty. And if they change the poverty paradigm, then we won't have having a conversation about the money, because we already know it's not the money that's the cause of people not coming back to court. It's not the money that cause people to remain in prison. It's poverty and poverty alone. Thank you, David. We really appreciate you coming on. How can we get in touch with you? How can our viewers and listeners get in touch with you?
So you can go to bailproject.org. That is our website, and you can reach out to us through there.
All right. And we remind our listeners and our viewers to continue to support Rattling the Bars and the Real News. You know, you only get this kind of information from Rattling the Bars or the Real News. You're not going to get a David on NBC or CBS or Fox. You're not going to get a David talking about poverty and how poverty is being used, is being criminalized. You're not going to get this nowhere but here. And we ask that you continue to support this network and continue to support Rattling the Bars. Thank you very much, David.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for watching the Real News Network, where we lift up the voices, stories, and struggles that you care about most. And we need your help to keep doing this work. So please tap your screen now, subscribe, and donate to the Real News Network. Solidarity forever.